Okay, welcome back everyone. So this is our last topic in this term. I'm sure you're excited to hear that. And it's all in relation to time zones, and it contains information relating to what we've been doing with longitude and latitude as well. So all of the topics in this last unit tie together really well, and you could expect to see them mixed together in a question in an exam. But before we get into that, let's look at some vocab that you need to understand. So we've got what's called standard time zones, which now the world is divided into sections depending on their longitude. And the reason it's done is so that clocks in certain areas can be aligned or made the same. Each time zone is a certain number of hours ahead or behind Greenwich Mean Time. So remember when I showed you the PowerPoint, or when you should have looked at the PowerPoint, which the Greenwich Meridian is, that is where time starts. And we've got an international dateline as well, and that passes through the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Now we're going to be using a slightly different map, and I just want to pull it up now. So this is a map we're going to be using this time. So you can see, I hope, the numbers at the top, and the times down the bottom of this map. So the numbers up the top, and let's start where the grey line is. So I'm talking about this line. Whoa, that is not what we wanted to do. Let me see if I can bring the map back. Okay, so it appears I can't draw on this one, but the grey line on the left-hand side of this map is where time is starting, Greenwich Mean Time. So down at the bottom you can see there's an arrow pointing up saying if it's 12 midnight here at Greenwich Mean Time, that is 0 hours. So everything, all the time zones in the world are related back to this place in the world, Greenwich, which is near London, remember? So Greenwich Mean Time, that's where it starts. And you can see as you go further across the world to the right, the numbers are going up. So for example, Rome, which falls in the +1 category, +1 line, and this is where a ruler would be super useful for you to have, and I'll give you printed handouts of these maps, but it's also available in your textbook, is +1. So that means 1 hour ahead of Greenwich. So whatever the time is in Greenwich, Rome is going to be 1 hour further ahead of that. And you can see that keeps going across the world. If we get as far as Beijing, we can see that Beijing is in the +8 category. That means Beijing is 8 hours in time ahead of Greenwich. Now, if we keep traveling further over, that's where the international dateline passes. Now, it's not a straight line. It works around countries and things like that. What the international dateline is all about is, at that point, is where the time in the countries past that are going to be in the next day. So the date's changing there. So this map has been drawn so that Greenwich Mean Time or Greenwich itself is towards the left-hand side of the map, but it could be anywhere. And if you travel in the right direction, from there you're adding hours on your time ahead of that. And if you're traveling in the left direction, you're hours behind that. So everything is in relation to this. So hopefully that makes sense. So these +1, +2, whatever, that is what we're going to use. So let's go back to our OneNote. So there's some information here. So to calculate the number of hours one city is ahead or behind another city, we use this little formula. The time difference equals the destination time zone minus the origin time zone. So that's just saying that where we're going minus where we started, the time in those two places. And we use that map that I just showed you. So let's have a look at an example and do it now. So if it takes 6.5 hours to fly from Brisbane to Perth, if you take off, so that's what it's telling. It takes 6.5 hours to fly from Brisbane to Perth. If you take off at 8 a.m. in Brisbane, at what time will you arrive in Perth? And if you take off at 8 a.m. in Perth, at what time will you arrive in Brisbane? So travel time is 6 hours, 30 minutes. And we're told that it leaves at 8 a.m. Brisbane time. So we're going to use this little formula I gave you here. The time difference equals the destination time zone minus the origin time zone. So our destination is Perth. Our origin is Brisbane. So let's whip back over to this map and looks for Perth. So here is Perth in this section. So Perth is at +8, and here is Brisbane. and Brisbane is at +10. So they're exactly how you find it. You don't need to change it, just use exactly what it says there. So destination minus origin. So Perth is +8 minus Brisbane, which is +10. And then you just treat it like normal numbers. So 8 minus 10 is -2 hours. So what that says is the time in Perth is 2 hours behind Brisbane. So the way to use that is, well, you could do it two ways. You could work out the landing time in Perth based on what it is and then take 2 hours off, or you can take it off at departure time, and that's what I've done here. So the time in Perth at takeoff would have been 8 o'clock minus the 2 hours, so 6 a.m. Therefore, the landing time in Perth would have been 6 a.m. plus the 6.5 hours travel time, or 12:30 p.m. So either way would work for this. That's just one possible way to do it. So any problems with that, please let me know. Now, the second part says, if you take off at 8 a.m. in Perth, at what time will you arrive in Brisbane? So the process is the same, but our origin and our destination are different. So it says it leaves at 8 a.m. Perth time. The time difference is +10, that's Brisbane, minus +8, that's Perth. So Brisbane is 2 hours ahead of Perth, which makes sense based on what we've just done. So the process here that I've used is exactly the same. What is the time in Brisbane when we took off? If it was 8 a.m. in Perth and Brisbane is 2 hours ahead, add the 2 on, so it would have been 10 a.m. in Brisbane. Therefore, the landing time is that 10 a.m. plus 6 hours and 30 minutes travel time, 4:30 p.m. So you can see it's actually quite simple using the map and using to work out the differences between times and then factoring in your travel time as well. So hopefully that is pretty clear. Let's do one more, bit more complex example here. Okay, so we've got a flight from Brisbane to Los Angeles, takes 17 hours, including a stopover at Honolulu. If the flight leaves Brisbane at 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, when will it arrive in Los Angeles? And they want that in Brisbane time and also in Los Angeles time. So we're going to do the in Brisbane time first. So in a very similar way than we did the last question, we're going to work out what was the time in Brisbane when they landed in Los Angeles. So what was Brisbane time when they landed in Los Angeles? So we don't need to do anything to convert that first one. The takeoff time we were told was 1:30 p.m. Sunday in Brisbane. And we're also told that it's a 17-hour flight. So it's simply a matter of taking that 1:30 p.m. and adding the 17 hours on. Now, this is where it gets a bit tricky. Depending on what time of day it is, you might be moving into the next day, as we have done here. 1:30 p.m. in Sunday will take us to 6:30 a.m. in Monday. And if you struggle doing that, I suggest you break things into 12-hour sections. So, for example, 1:30 plus 12 hours will take us up to 1:30 a.m. and then we've still got another 5 hours to go, so that is going to take us up to 6:30 a.m. So that could be one way that you do it, and don't forget that takes us into the next day. So you have to be super careful when you're traveling a long way that it's generally often going to be forward or backward in time, so keep that in mind. Now part B says, when will it arrive in Los Angeles time? Now, we haven't been told that. The first thing we need to do is work out the time difference. So again, that exact same formula that we used before is what we're going to use. So we need the destination time zone, which is Los Angeles time. We already know the origin time zone. That was +10 because that was Brisbane. So let's look at Los Angeles. So Los Angeles, hopefully you know, is in America, the US. So if we have a look, Los Angeles falls in this category. It's -8. 8 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time, and Brisbane is 10 hours ahead of Greenwich Mean Time. So let's go back. So that's going to be -8 minus +10. And then we just work it out with numbers as we did before. So that is going to give us -18 hours. So that means Los Angeles is 18 hours behind Brisbane in time. So we need to just take that landing time in Brisbane that we worked out up here and take those 18 hours off to figure out what time it would have been in Los Angeles at that time. So 6:30 a.m. Monday is when we say we're landing Brisbane time. Take 18 hours off, and that's actually 12:30 p.m. Sunday. And maybe you notice something a little bit funny about this, that we're actually landing in Los Angeles 1 hour before we even leave the same time Brisbane time, because they're 18 hours behind, and it's only a 17-hour flight. So sometimes that happens when you travel around the world. You gain days, you lose days. It's interesting. Now, I've just thrown a little extra one here. How long is the flight time in total? So if you were told how long the stopover was, you would deduct that from the total travel time. Now, we're not told here, so we can't work it out, but keep that in mind if you're given a question that says how long is the flight time and you've got some information about stopovers. Stopovers are when you are not flying, so you would take that off any flight time. Okay, that's it. Very last topic. So there's some questions there for you to do. Please don't forget to have a look at the revision, which is available for you next. And if you have any questions, please see me in class.